All right, so what we're going to do today is that today we're going to focus on the tools and techniques. So we're going to focus on the all right, so this is not changed. It should be the tools and techniques of cost accounting. All right, so when we look at the tools and techniques of cost accounting, which is what we're interested in, which is what we're doing today, it's like you are a mechanic, all right? You need to know the tools and techniques that you use, all right? You need to have your tools in place, all right? You need to have the methods in place. You need to have the techniques in place. Then any motor vehicle that comes to you for a repair, you should be able to use your tools that you have, your techniques that you have. You are told when dealing with this, you must lean forward like that and do like this. So it's things that you can apply over and over in various circumstances because there are tools and techniques. So we're going to teach you today some of the basic tools and techniques that you will need to be successful in cost accounting. And so when it comes to, if you're doing a semester module, you find out that the semester module is, which is MAC3701, is a lot easier to pass because then you have a whole 100 marks in the exam being dedicated to costing, and the costing alone is very easy because you will need the tools and techniques which you apply to principles of accounting. So that should be a lot easy for students to pass this. So when it comes to cost accounting, right, the major purpose of us doing cost accounting is to be able to establish the cost of something, So we need to determine the cost of whatever we want to establish so that we can know if it is, so we can use it for budgeting purposes, Because if we know that this thing costs so much to produce, then we can budget production in the following year because we know we will require so much of this. We can establish standards based on the cost information we have. We can also use the cost information for pricing purposes, also for cost control, So all these things are going to feed into profitability. And even in cases where you're not looking at profits, you can significantly reduce or manage your costs. So in our cost accounting modules, we specifically focus on a manufacturing company, right, which does manufacturing for profit. Okay, so that's the basic framework that we're dealing with. And so there is individual items for which we need to determine the cost. And those individual items are referred to as a cost object. So we need to know the cost for each cost object. So let's say that if you are a bakery, then we need to know or to have an idea of the cost per loaf of bread, right? So I'm just giving that as an example because a bakery would be producing the bread and then the unit that you're going to sell is the bread, right? So you need to know the cost per unit, all right, for these purposes. So that in the future, you can budget properly. You can also determine the price. You can also do cost control. So the cost of a product in production in cost accounting is made up of the direct material, right? Which is so we can have more than one direct material. We can also refer to direct material as ingredients, right? Or components, depending on the item that we're looking at. Then sometimes we have direct labor. Although in today's highly automated environment, we seldom have that much direct labor, right? So direct labor is the cost of the individuals that have to do the actual work. So it's part of the cost. And today we're not going to go into cost classification. We're just going to go into the tools and techniques. All right. Then sometimes we also have variable manufacturing overheads per unit. Then our fixed manufacturing overheads per unit. So if you add up everything here, this is going to be the manufacturing or production cost per unit. So these figures just provided them to you for the sake of an example for illustrative purposes. All right, so this is what we're going to look at so that you can determine the cost of production. All right, so which means that we need to determine the cost of direct materials used in production, direct labor, and manufacturing overheads. And remember, this cost is being determined on a unit, right? And so, of all the input we need to determine the input cost per unit. Direct material 1, the cost of direct material 1 per unit. The cost of direct material 2 per unit. Everything should be per unit if the unit is our cost object. All right. So that is what we do. So when you get into your assessments, one of the first things that you need to check is to identify what constitutes a unit. So a unit could be a 25-liter bucket of paint. All right. Okay. So identifying a unit is essential, is crucial, because everything that you have to do, you have to adjust to the cost of a unit. For example, in the making of paint, you might buy 1,000 liters of water. All right. Let's say you buy 1,000 liters of water. But you do not want to determine the cost of this 1,000 liters of water, because the water you buy with the 1,000 liters is not the cost object. The cost object is the 25-liter bucket of paint. That's the output. So which means that you have to do adjustments here. From the cost of 1,000 liters, you have to make adjustments to determine, therefore, how much is the cost of the water to be used in this 25-liter bucket. Right. So that says to you, it's crucial to be able to determine what constitutes a unit, because all adjustments should be adjusted to the cost per unit. Right. Right. And one of the key relationships that we use in cost accounting, I don't know why I didn't prepare that on a separate page, is this. Remember, we need the input and its price to determine the cost per unit. Okay, so we're going to have a standard quantity, all right, multiplied by a standard price of that quantity. So that's going to give us the standard cost per unit. Now, this is the standard cost per unit. This is the standard price per quantity, not per unit, per quantity. In other words, we're paying to utilize, to get that input into production. We're going to pay. So what's the standard price? And we're going to use it in production. What's the standard quantity per unit? So we're going to use certain quantity for every unit, and we're paying a certain price for the quantity. So if we multiply the standard quantity per unit multiplied by the standard price per quantity, it's going to give us the standard cost per unit, because the unit here we refer to is the cost object, the thing whose cost we want to determine. So that's the cost object. So we're going to assign cost to the cost object. Right, so one of the rules that are very important, which I repeat many times in my class, is the units of measurement. All right. So if your standard quantity, let's say whatever you are making, right? If your standard quantity is kilograms per unit, right, then your standard price needs to be rands per kilogram. All right. So if your standard quantity is being measured in terms of kilograms per unit, then your standard price should be measured in terms of rands per the standard measurement used in the standard quantity. All right. So it's rands per the measurement basis used in the standard quantity, which is kilogram. So we have standard quantity being kilograms per unit, and the price being rands per that standard, which is kilograms. Okay, so you can't say milligrams, or you can't say grams per unit multiplied by the price per ton. This is like, I don't know, this is so confused, because you have the price you are given there is the price of a ton, right? And you are multiplying that with the grams. There's no relationship. Things should be aligned. So you look at your units of measurement, then your selling price should also agree with the, no, not your selling price. I see SB there. It's your standard price. Should also agree with the units of measurement, rands per the units of measurement. So if we have grams per unit, then we must have rands per gram. All right. If the standard quantity we need is measured in liters per unit, then we need to have rands per liter. All right. So if we multiply liters per unit, which is the standard quantity, multiplied by rands per liter, then we're gonna get the cost, which is per unit. All right. So the cost is rands per unit. That's the cost of whatever we are measuring in liters. Is it water? Is it a certain ingredient? But whatever it is. All right. So we can only multiply the standard quantity, then the standard cost, the standard quantity and the standard price to get the standard cost per unit if the units of measurement are aligned. So that is extremely important, because you're going to be told that for example, that the wage rate, that we're talking of labor, right? So the wage rate is at 100 rand per hour, and it takes 15 minutes to produce one chair, for an assembler to produce one chair. All right. Okay. It takes, so let me just make it a little more interesting, and let me say it takes all right, let me say it takes 20 minutes to produce 3 chairs. And remember, now what we need to, our cost object is a chair, not 3 chairs. So it takes us 20 minutes to produce 3 chairs, and the cost is 100 rand per hour. So what we need to determine the cost of the labor, all right, the cost of the labor per unit. So we say direct labor cost per unit, all right, is going to be equal to the standard quantity of labor multiplied by the standard price of labor, right? In other words, how much time do we need to do a single chair times the price per that amount of time. So we have 20 minutes and we have 100 rand per hour, and then so 100 rand per hour is the standard price, and our minutes is the standard quantity for 3 chairs. So you will see that all you need to do is to do adjustments so that we can have the standard quantity for one cost object or per unit multiplied by the standard price for that quantity. And the units of measurement we use for the standard quantity here should also be related to the standard price, so that our price is rands per the units that we used here. All right, and so you can choose to use minutes, but generally it's better to use hours, to change everything to hours. So if you decide to change everything to hours, then your standard price remains 100 rand per hour. Then your standard quantity now should be in hours, but it's in minutes. So you're going to say 20 out of 60. All right, so this is the number of hours required for 3 chairs. Now for one chair, you divide again by 3. All right. Is that so? Because we need the cost, the standard quantity per unit, but this is the standard quantity per 3 units. 20 minutes is the standard quantity for 3 units. So the standard quantity for 1 is going to be 20 over 3, all right, minutes. Then you divide that by 60. Right. So then now when we do this, what we have now is because we divided by 60, we have the standard quantity in hours. We divided by 3. We have the standard quantity per unit because this was for 3 units. If we divide by 3, then we have per unit. We divide by 60, then we have per hours per unit. Right, so if you can do such an arrangement, you're going to get to pass your module. If you're doing MAC3761, these are the tools and techniques that you need. All right, so now you're going to say 100 multiplied by 20 over 60, which are hours, right, over 3. So this is now the standard price. This is 100 rand per hour multiplied by hours per unit. So you have changed this from minutes for 3 chairs to hours per chair. So if you can do such an arrangement, you're going to pass, because this is the tool that you will need. All right, so it's a pervasive skill, right? You're going to use it when doing absorption costing, when doing direct costing. You will use the same principles when doing cost volume profit analysis, relevant costing, standard costing, budgeting, transfer pricing and divisions, right? You will always be doing these things. Whatever you do, whether it's process costing, joint costing, this principle, it's not principle, it's a technique, right? So we are teaching you the tools and techniques that you need, so that whatever the situation you find yourself in, you should be able to manipulate information given. So the cost per unit, remember, is going to be equal to your standard price, your standard quantity, right, per unit of measurement, your standard quantity per unit multiplied by your standard price, which agrees with this unit of measurement, to give you the standard cost per unit. So sometimes, which means if you have any of these two, you can get the other. So sometimes you have the standard cost per unit and you have standard price. So you can determine the standard quantity, right, by simply saying the standard quantity is going to be equal to the standard cost per unit over the standard price. All right. So that's what you're going to do. Okay. So what I'm saying to you now is that this is your ticket to passing. If you can do this level of manipulation, then you're going to pass. If you're doing MAC3701, you're going to pass. If you're doing the year module, you're still going to pass, because you're going to accumulate the marks in your costing, and obviously your finance, you can also get more marks from there. But if you can do this manipulation, this is the primary formula to use. And if you can do that, you're going to pass. So let's look at some of the relationships and how we can manipulate them in accounting. All right, so we've just demonstrated there how to change time quantities. Sometimes you are given time in seconds and you need to convert that to hours. So that's something you need to know, right? They tell you that this the mixing job, which is done by the machine, takes 9 seconds. Right. To mix 20 liters of paint takes 9 seconds. Okay. And so that's going, in that they are giving you the standard quantity, and they might give you the standard price, that the cost of mixing per hour is going to be equal to 1,000 rand per hour. But now mixing 20 liters requires 9 seconds. So you need to know how to change from seconds to an hour. All right. So if it is seconds, if you divide by 60, then you have changed to minutes. You divide by another 60, you have changed to hours. So if you want to change seconds from minutes, if you want to change seconds to hours, it means you divide by 3,600. So that's a tool and a technique that you can always use. And remember, things must be logical, all right? Things should make sense to you when you deal with them, when you deal with the relationships. The things you deal with should make logical sense to you. For example, if it takes 9 seconds to do something, and it costs 100 rand per hour. Then obviously you can't say 100 rand per hour multiplied by 9, then you get 900 rand as the total cost. Because come on, this 100 rand is per hour, and this is not even an hour, it's only 9 seconds. You can't be that naive, you can't be that blind to not realize that. So if you apply your mind to what you're doing, the things you do must make logical sense to say, but this is 9 seconds, it can't give me 900 when 1 hour gives me 100, so it must be less. So you can come and say, right, 100 rand is equal to 1 hour, which is equal to 3,600 seconds. And how much is it for 9 seconds? All right, so you can lay out your calculation like this. 100 is equal to 3,600. X is equal to 9. Then you cross multiply, right? You cross multiply. Then if you cross multiply, then you end up with 9 times 100 over 3,600, like that. Then that's going to be your value of X. That is the cost for 9 seconds. You can start from this level where you have to put things side by side and then manipulate as you go. But once you have the experience, then you should be able to quickly manipulate things, right? Quickly, if you see that 100 rand is for an hour, then 9 seconds is obviously going to be equal to 9 times 100 over 3,600. All right. In other words, you change these to hours, so it's 9 over 3,600, which is now, this is the standard quantity is now hours times the standard price, which is 100 per hour. So the units of measurement you have aligned the units of measurement, and that's going to help you collect as many marks as possible. This thing I'm telling you now is extremely important because it will help you collect as many marks as you cannot believe. And once you do that, because remember, you need every mark, right? You need every mark that you can possibly collect. All right. So we also have the weight, because we dealt with time there. We can also deal with weight. So it's basically the same principle of the technique. The technique is the same principle. All right. So sometimes you guys, we get given things that are difficult, get given milligrams, and things are being charged in grams. Like, for example, let's say the cost of so I'm trying to think of a question quickly, right? So let's say the cost of something is 80 milligrams, and 100 milligrams is gonna give you 1 gram, right? But the cost of something needs a quantity of 80 milligrams to manufacture, and you are being told that, all right, something needs 80 milligrams to manufacture, and the cost is, you buy this thing in tons, and the cost is, let's say, 100, or let's just say in kilograms. So 100 rand per kilogram, right? So 100 rand per kilogram, as you can see, is the standard price, because that's the price per kilogram. But here we have 80 milligrams. So we can't say 100 multiplied by 80, because this shows that we are very confused, right? So we are told that 100 rand is equal to 1 kg. That's 100 rand per kilogram. And how much is it going to cost for 80 milligrams? So we have to change this 80 milligrams to kilograms, right? Because it's easier. We could also change these kilograms to milligrams, all right? Which means that we could, so whatever way we do, they have to agree, right? So if we decide to change the milligrams to what? To kilograms, we know that we have been told they will tell us some special relationships. They won't tell us the basic, like 1 liter is equal to 1,000 milliliters. They won't tell you that, because you should know. They won't tell you that 1000 grams is equal to 1 kilogram. But they would tell you about milligrams because obviously, who deals with milligrams in life? So they would tell you that 100 milligrams is equal to 1 gram. So we can first of all change this 80 milligrams to grams. Remember, 100 milligrams is 1 gram. So this is going to be 80 over 100. Now what we have here now, this figure, 80 divided by 100 is grams now. So we have the standard quantity having been converted from milligrams to grams. But the standard price is still per kilogram. So we also want this to be in kilograms. So we divide further by it, because this is grams now, we divide by a further 1000. We have changed this to kilograms. Right now we have our standard price being equal to 100 rand per kilogram. And our standard quantity being equal to, I don't know what simplifying this will give me, or something like 0.08, I don't know, I don't care, per unit. So sorry, this is 0.08 kilograms. I didn't say this is the correct answer. The correct answer obviously you get by simplifying, whatever it is. Now you have that as kilograms per unit, 100 rand per kilogram. So you have the selling price as rands per kilogram, right? The standard quantity is kilograms per unit. Now you can multiply those two because you have manipulated so that the units of measurement agree with the units that are used in the standard price. They have to agree, right, all the time. So, so we'll give you examples now that we're going to be dealing with where we have to deal with those examples, right? Right. So we have also liquids, things that you need to know, that a liter is 1000 milliliters, right? 1000 liters is 1 kiloliter. You also need to know these units of measurement for electricity. And in cases where it's a bit higher or something that you would not ordinarily know, they would tell you. But the most important thing is you need to align, all right, the relationships. You need to align the relationships, your standard price and your standard quantity. And that's your ticket to passing the module. Right, so that was it with the standard price and standard quantity thing. So one of the things that is very important also is the use of percentages. Because many times you listen to the story, they tell you that the budgeted price was this, right? And then the actual was 10% more than budgeted, right? Or the budgeted, the actual was 80% less or 80% less than, or 20% less than the budgeted. So you need to deal with those relationships to find one variable missing using a percentage, right? So this is something that is very important that you need to utilize, right? So let's say that the budgeted price is given to you as 3.50 rand per kilogram, right? Then they tell you that the actual price was 20% less than budgeted, right? So obviously it's 20% less. So if you say 1 kilogram was equal to 3.50 rand, right? But now 1 kilogram is being reported to have been costing us 20% less. So 3.50 rand minus 20% of 3.50 rand, right? That's the relationship. Okay, because the price is 3.50 and we want 20% of that price. Okay, so in other words, this is going to be the equivalent of 0.8 or 80%. Because if something is 20% less, then it's going to be 80% of whatever we are relating it to. All right. Okay, so something is 20% less, then we're going to multiply it by 0.8. All right, and then we get to rand 18. Right, and then you can quickly check, because sometimes you can make a mistake. Because in the examination, remember what's happening right now is that somebody is telling you these things, right? So it's very easy. You follow somebody's explaining, you don't even understand why we should be having this session. I mean, come on. But in the examination, when you're under exam pressure, when you're panicking, when the time is ticking and there's a lot of issues, your brain is not properly prepared. You can make a lot of mistakes, which you can only regret after the exam. So this practice is going to be very important for you. And we also have a proof of accuracy check. You can check your own work quickly, especially you do this especially on those areas that you know them, and you just want to check, do a quick check that did I get it right. So I have 2 rand 80. Is it correct? So you can quickly check. Is 2 rand 80 actually 80% of 3 rand 50, right? Because they say it's 80%, it's 20% less, right? So what you're gonna do there then is to quickly calculate 80% of 3 rand 50 and see if it gives you that. So what about if they say it's 30%, the budgeted price was 3 rand 50 per kilogram. Then what about if the actual price is 30% more than budgeted? Then obviously that's 3 rand 50, right, plus 30% of 3 rand 50 because it's more, right? So there's an additional 30% of that 3 rand 50, right? Or if you want, you can quickly say multiply by 1,3. Remember, 1,3 is 30%. 3% is 1,03. Have you seen how many students, when they are told that there's a 7% increase, they go and say 1,7? They have told that there's a 3,5% increase, they go and say 1,35%. Like a lot, and a lot, so that it becomes worrying why you would reason like that. So these are things that you need to have to master, these relationships, these percentages, because that's what's going to come in your examination, and you need to know how to use these tools we're giving you now, all these techniques, so that when it is the time for the exam, you don't need to practice these things in the exam. They need to be cemented, they need to be mastered, they need to be inculcated into your head, so that if you see something and there they say the actual price was 10% more, then you just know that it's going to 1 by 1 multiplied by the standard price or the budgeted price. Quick, you don't have to really think if you have to how to construct that. If they say 3% or it was 4% higher, then you don't have to write 1,4% and make a mistake. You know you will write 1,04, right? So that's things that you need to be properly prepared for. So if you go through past exam papers, you will see what we're discussing here is basically the bulk. These are the techniques, the bulk of the techniques you will use. About 80–90% of all calculations will require you to utilize these techniques that we're discussing, which is exactly the reason why we are discussing them. In some cases, right, you are given profit relationships, and you are given the profit as a markup on cost, right? I'm saying these things because you know what happens sometimes? The examiners can give you the cost, or rather they can give you information that allows you to calculate the cost of something. So you're gonna do all your manipulations and you determine the overall cost, and they tell you that the selling price or the markup on cost is 40%. The question says determine the selling price, the budgeted selling price of the entity. And I give you 8 marks for that, or 12 marks for that. And you wonder, how do I determine the selling price? Because and after the exam, students will be asking one another in those groups that you are in, WhatsApp groups, Facebook, like where was the selling price? Anybody? Obviously, you need to manipulate the things given. So sometimes you're given the cost. Let's say you do your calculations and you get the cost of 250, right? And you are told the markup on cost is 40%. In other words, whatever cost you have to add 40% on top to get the selling price. So basically for me, it's 250 multiplied by 1.4, right? Or 250, which is the cost, plus 40% of 250 on top. So this is the profit. This is the cost. Then on top of the cost, I'm going to add profit. Then I get my selling price. Right. So this could be your direct materials that you determined, plus your direct labor, plus your variable manufacturing overheads, plus your fixed production overheads. So you have done calculation A, B, C, D, E there. Then eventually the total cost of per unit is 250. But the question requires you to determine the selling price. And they gave you the markup. So you just say the total cost that you get, 40% on top of that. So either 250 times 1.4, or if you want to make sure, you can do it like this. But this is much quicker, right? And then you can also have a case where they tell you the markup on what? The markup on sales is 20%. Now, they didn't say the markup on cost, they say the markup on sales. So you have to pay attention there, because with markup on sales, you don't just say multiply by 1.2. They are telling you that given the selling price, all right, 20% of the selling price is profit. The other 80% is cost. This is the relationship when they say markup on sales. With markup on cost, you just add that markup. But with markup on sales, you need to subtract it from 100%. If the markup is 20%, it means in the selling price, 20% is going to be the profit, right? Then 80% is the cost. So obviously, if 80% is the cost, then so my 80% is going to be equal to 250, right? Then I need 100%, which is the selling price, right? Is equal to what? Okay. So I can do the manipulations there, and I end up with 250 over 80%. So this is going to be the selling price, right? So this is going to be the selling price. So there's a lot of manipulations that you can do there. For example, you can have, so you have your sales, right? Then you have your cost of sales or production cost or whatever it is, right? Made up of your direct material, direct labor, variable manufacturing overheads, fixed manufacturing overheads. Now, we haven't discussed methods of inventory valuation yet, so that we can talk of direct costing. So we're going to talk of the broad standards like that. All right. So then you're going to get your gross profit there. Do you know that sometimes you can be able to calculate the sometimes you have information that allows you to calculate cost of, no, this is not cost of sales. You have information that allows you to calculate sales, and then maybe you determine your sales as let's say 1,000, and they tell you that the markup on what, on whatever, on cost or on sales. So let's say the markup on sales is 30%, right? This is the markup on sales is 30%. So it means the cost of sales is going to be 70% of the selling price, right? So in this case, now you know that your cost of sales should be what? 700, right? That's 70% of, so it should be 700 here, right? So which means you could have, say, you have your direct material, you have your direct labor. You could calculate, in other words, I'm not saying you are given that information, but the information you're given, it allows you to calculate your direct material, allows you to calculate your direct labor, allows you to calculate your variable manufacturing overheads. And this guy here is missing, right? But you need to know that if you add up everything here, right, it's gonna have to give you 700, because you are being guided by the markup on sales, that the cost of sales should be 70% of the sales. So it must be 700 here. So which means if you add up everything here, you should be able to get 700. So from here now, you can go back to determine the fixed manufacturing overheads. So with this module, there's a lot of ways to spin around, spin this way, spin that way, to determine things. And it's not going to be as straightforward. So if you have heard about this module, or if you have done this module before, you obviously can attest to what we're talking about, right? Like, information is not immediately clear. That's why we try to give you some of these tools and techniques. So this is not a particular topic we're dealing with. It's just tools and techniques. It could be used in absorption costing, in direct costing, in CVP, in budgeting, in any topic. It's just as the tools that you need to tackle questions, right? Then another case is where there is going to be Namalo, I see your hand now. Can you write down your question here? Now I'm gonna come to you once we are done, right? My apologies, I didn't tell you that we will take your questions once we are done, because then others might want to leave once the session is over. Then we can be left behind with those who would like to ask. All right. So please, I saw your hand. I'll come back to you. So we have case number 3, where sometimes there's a loss or gain in production. All right. Say we need 800 grams to produce a unit, but this 800 grams is after a 4% loss. So which means that when you put in your production units, right, you have to cater for this 4% loss as well, so that eventually after this 4% loss, you are left with 800 grams, the standard quantity required. So you have to take into account the loss, right? So as you can see here, we need 800 grams, but this 800 is the 96% remaining, because it's after a 4% loss. So this is extremely important, because it's going to affect a lot of things. It's going to affect your budgeting. Sometimes they say prepare the material purchases budget, and you need to know how much material we're talking about, because 800 grams is used to make 1 unit. But if you put in 800 grams, then there's going to be a 4% loss, and then that unit is not sufficient. So you have to put in more than 800, right? So you have to put in more than 800 on top with that 4% loss. So remember, the 800 is what is remaining after 4% loss. So the 800 is the 96% remaining, right? So that's a technique that you need to know. So now we need to know what's the quantity for 100%. If 800 represents 96, right? What's the quantity for 100%? Right, so you're gonna do your what is that thing called? Your cross multiplication, right? It's your cross multiplication obviously will lead you to 800 over 96%. This is the quantity you have to put into production, so that when you lose the 4%, then you are left with the 800, and that 800 is going to be sufficient to produce this. So in budgeting, they give you questions like this in budgeting, where they want you to determine the raw materials budget, something like that, or where they want you to determine the total quantity required, So you need to be paying attention to that. So sometimes there's also a gain in production, which means that if there's a 5% gain, right, you need to know that you need to put in 95% of the required, because when the process starts, then this 5% gain is going to has to be included, right? All right, so you need to put in 95% of what is required, right? Because you know that the 5% will be a gain, and eventually it's going to be the full quantity that you needed. Right, so I hope you guys have enjoyed that. So what I'm going to do now, I have examples from the previous papers. So this example is from your past exam paper for October, November 2023. So that's last year. You probably wrote this paper. If you are repeating, or they wrote this paper if this is your first time. I think so, right? So that's the information we have. So we are told that this is budgeted information per unit. So we have 3 units. This called diff door and pain. I don't know what that is. So this is probably some prescription, some pharmaceutical drugs. I don't know. But whatever they are, that's not important. So these are the units, not the units. These are the products. Product C, D, and E. And we are looking at direct material costs. So we have we had more than one ingredient. So this is one of the ingredients. Right. And that ingredient costs 7 Rand 20 per unit of C, 4 Rand 80 per unit of D, and 12 Rand per unit of E. So this is a practical question that students wrote last year. So this, and they tell you under additional information, right? So they tell you under additional information that this ingredient that you see here is required in all and is currently under short supply. So the suppliers have indicated to you that they can only supply a maximum of 30,000 grams. 30,000 grams. They tell you that 100 milligrams uh, 100 milligrams of this input costs 24 Rand. And they tell you that there are 1,000 milligrams in 1 gram. Right. So they've given you the information. Now the question says you need to determine the shortage in codeine phosphate. Basically, you need to determine what's the quantity required for production. Right? So you have to look and think, because this is actually a question that came in last year, October, November, 10 November 2023. And yeah, you sit with the question. How many marks are you going to collect? I would expect you to collect all the marks, because now you apply those tools and techniques that we talk about. So this is the standard cost per unit. All right, the direct material cost per unit, direct material costs per unit. And so what we need now is the standard quantity and the standard price. So it's going to be very easy, right? It's going to be very easy. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to write down this somewhere here. So I have 7 Rand 20, 4 Rand 80, and 12 Rand. Right, so this is the standard cost per unit. Right, and we are being told the what here? The standard price. All right, so look at here at the story. So the standard price is given to us as 24 Rand per what? 24 Rand per 100 milligrams. You see their trickery there. It's 100 milligrams, right? So it's 24 Rand per 100 milligrams. And they tell you that 1,000 milligrams are going to give us a gram. And what we want is to compare with this number of grams, 30,000 grams. So we rather change everything to grams, because grams are smaller quantity. If we change everything to milligrams, then we end up having to change 30,000 grams to milligrams, and then we multiply that by 1,000. So that becomes 30 million milligrams. So rather we change the milligrams to grams so that we can compare here. So what I'm going to do as a student, if I don't know, then I know that this is 24 Rand per 100, right? So in other words, if I want per milligram, so I'm going to divide by 100 here, right? So if I divide by 100, then I have 24, I don't know what, 24 over 100 per gram, because it's not per milligram, sorry, because now I've changed the price from 24 Rand per 100 milligrams. I want to know what's the cost of 1 milligram. All right, so this is what happened last year, and some students went through this. Right, so you have to be able to manipulate. This is the standard price. You just need to manipulate to the correct units, to the desired units of measurement. So if I do this, then I have, so I'm going to have my standard price being 0 Rand 24 per milligram. All right, so the price of 1 milligram is 24 cents, but I need the price for 1,000 milligrams, because now I want to change the standard price from rands per milligram to rands per gram, right? So if I do that, I'm going to multiply 0.24 by a 1000. So I have, so this is what I have. So 0.24 multiplied by 1000. Okay. So I have 240 rand per gram. Now I'm happy because I have grams, and I want to compare them with those grams that are given to us, 30,000 grams. So the standard price, if you look now, which we have just changed, the standard price is going to be equal to what? What is this? What did we get there? 240, right? 240 per gram. 240 per gram. Right? Now we have the standard cost per unit and the standard price. We can determine the standard quantity by simply saying standard quantity is equal to standard cost over standard price. Remember that formula, that equation I told you about. Standard quantity times standard price is going to be giving us the standard cost. And remember the units of measurement. So if we have our units of measurement here as 240 per gram, then it means that our standard quantity is going to be grams per unit. All right. So how many grams per unit do we need? So I'm going to say 7 rand 20 divided by 240. So I get 0.03 grams per unit. Then here I do the same, it's 4 rand 80. Right, I divide by 240. Then I get 0.02 grams per unit. Then that's 12 rand. Then I divide by 240. Then I get 0.05 grams per unit. Now that's it. That was all the required adjustment. Now if I now know that I need 0.03 grams, 0.02 grams, I just need to know how much did I budget, how many units did I budget to produce. So in this question, I forgot to include that when I was choosing the question, right? I didn't see that that would be required. But that is very simple because now you just determine if the budget was 10,000 units here and there 8,000 units and there 15,000 units for whatever reason. All right. I'm just picking up these amounts from my head because I forgot to put in. But the work that needs to be done was changing from 24 rand per 100 milligrams to so many rands per gram. So that was the whole point of this question. Because once you get your standard quantity, then you multiply by the budgeted units. Then you see how many grams are needed, and then you compare with 30,000. You will see that actually, let's say you might see that we need 31,500 grams, and we can only get 30,000 grams. So you have done well there. Right, so if you wrote this question last year, that is what you were expected to do. It's a tool, it's a technique you're going to apply in all the questions. So the other portion of the question there was saying that, so this is rather simple. So this is rather simple, right? So the question was saying, so this is about labor. So it says 13 minutes of labor time per unit, right? So this is the standard quantity. We are measuring how much does it take. Standard quantity could be liters, meters, seconds, kilograms, or whatever, the quantity needed of the input. So this is 13 minutes per unit. So that's the standard quantity. It's 13 minutes. Then the standard price is 45 rand per hour. Now you see the trickery. Standard price is 45 rand per hour, but we are given minutes here. So we can't just say 13 by 45 because this is 45 rand for each hour. So we have to change this standard quantity into hours. So we're going to divide by 13 over 60, right? So now this, once we divide by 60, because if we divide a minutes by 60, we're gonna get hours. So 13 minutes we divide by 60, we're gonna get what? This is hours. So now our standard quantity is hours per unit because we divided by 60. Now we can multiply by runs per hour. We can multiply by 45. So this was a bonus. You see, you collect a lot of marks. You collect a lot of marks for that, and then off you go. Right. So what I have for you here. So unfortunately, this is something that I forgot. These were the required production levels. So I'm so sorry. But the principle there was the conversion aspect of it. Right. So can you do that? So what I would like you to do is that I'm going to post this on YouTube. Right. So I would like you to, when you get to YouTube, you stop the question on this point, right? And try to calculate and see if you can make sense of this. Then the next thing I want you to do, I also have this Feb March MAC3701 2023 FIA examination. Right? So there was an FIA examination last year for this semester module. Right? So it gives you plus or minus the same things to think about, right? It gives you plus or minus the same things. Then it tells you a story. Then it wants you to what? Then it wants you to determine, all right, the cost. So I'm gonna just demonstrate one, and then the rest I want you to do them by yourself. There's an answer at the end, which I will display the answer so that you are able to make sense of it. So there's something that is very interesting here. So we're making two units, right? One is a Bolt unit. So this is an energy drink. So there's an energy drink called Bolt according to this, and it's 250 milliliters. Look at their trickery. They want you to change this to liters, and this is 500, and this is NED, right? But now look, they buy their water. So the standard they buy their water is 2 rand per liter. What is 2 rand per liter? That's the standard price. You see, the standard price is given per liter. So basically, you have to know that this is 0.25 liters, and that is 0.5 liters. Because you have the price per liter, you need liters per unit, right? So that you can multiply those two. But remember, the other trick again is that each liter of energy drink requires 900 milliliters. Okay. All right. So let's determine how much is the cost of water required here. Let's just do for Bolt, right? So Bolt is standard quantity is 0.25 liters per unit. Standard price is equal to 2 rand per liter, right? So we can multiply this standard quantity times the standard price. If I do that, I'm gonna get 0.25 multiplied by 2. So I get 0.5. So this 0.5 is rands per liter. Right? 0.5 per liter. But the water we require in a liter of drink is 900, not a full liter. So we have to, this is 0.5, right? Is this correct? I want to say 50 cents. So basically, I think that's 50 cents per liter, right? So what we got here is not the final answer we want because we got it per liter, but we want per 900 milliliters, right? So we have to say 0.5 multiplied by 0.9. Then we get 0.45 per unit. Did you see that? That was an exam where you change and change, you do a double change, and they do that a lot, right? If you will be in my class, all right, I'm a tutor actually. So if you will be in those who will be in my class, I will go through these tricks. You change once and you have to change again, and it's so dizzying, it's so exhausting, it's a lot of tricks. So remember here, we got for per liter, but we do not want per liter, we want per 900 milliliters, because the quantity of water we're going to put in a liter, in 1 liter, is 900. So we determine the cost per 1 liter of water, we actually want the cost of 900 milliliters, right? So can we do the second one together again to see how much sugar is going to be needed? All right, so sugar is needed for board, right? It's 25 rand per kilogram. What is this? 25 rand per kilogram is the standard price. Now what we need now is the standard quantity, and the standard quantity is 0.16. This is the standard quantity, but it's a standard quantity for 1 liter. We are interested in what? All right, so basically this is not water, right? So that's going to be sufficient like that. So that's why this one is rather what is that? It's rather simple, because then now we really don't have to adjust it to 900 milliliters backwards, right? So if we do that on that particular sugar, so that's going to be very easy, right? All right, so what do we do here? What do we do? So I given 25 rand per kilogram, right? So that's the standard price. So standard price is per kilogram. So we need the standard quantity to be in kilograms per unit, and that is what they have here, kilograms per 1 liter. This is a whatever it is. So we're gonna multiply that 25 multiplied by 0.16. Then you're gonna get what you get there. If you say 25 multiplied by 0.16, 25, let me just do that, 25 multiplied by 0.16, so I get 4 rand. But remember, this 4 rand is per liter, all right, because this is 0.16 per liter, so the 4 rand is per liter. But this board is actually 0.25, all right, so you're gonna 0.25 liters. So you have to multiply that 4 rand by 0.25. Because what we're saying is that we have determined the cost of 1 liter. What about the cost of 250 milliliters, or 0.25? So I will just quickly demonstrate again. So it determined the cost of 1 liter is 4 rand. So obviously the cost of 2 liters, right, we're going to multiply by 2, right? The cost of 3 liters, we're going to multiply that by 3. And the cost of 0.25 liters, we're going to multiply that by 0.25. So we want this for the 0.25 multiplied by 4, right? Right, and so that's the adjustment we need. So here is the questions again, because I want you to practice this and see if you can do the manipulations properly and get to the final answer, right? So I'm going to ask you from here, right? Can you do this? All right, so if you want, you can stop the recording here and look at that. Right, so let me just say this: 400, 350, 250. So what we require to produce is 400,000 here, 350,000 here, and 250,000 here. These are the units that we require. So I accidentally removed that information. 400, 350, 250. Right, so I want you to look at this and see if you can determine the shortage here. Try to do this manipulation, right? You stop and then you can come here. There is the answer, right? Try to see. Of course, I did it in a slightly condensed way, but you can play around until you make sense of that. So here's another question again, which came in an examination. So basically, your exam is about manipulations, right? And you can collect a lot of marks, unbelievable, by properly manipulating things. So have a look at this. See if you can manipulate that. There's the rest of them all. And then we need to determine the cost per unit of the above ingredients, including direct labor. So here's your answer, right? So your answer is for you to go to after your calculations to see if you can get the same answer, and keep on trying over and over, right? Like we did. We got this one, we also got this one for you. You can do the rest by yourself. And then so try to master this, because the tools and techniques we have discussed here are going to be pervasive in all the costing examination. Every calculation, every quantitative question will require you to utilize these skills, you know. So we're going to be stopping here for today, right? So we're going to be posting this on YouTube. So some of you who could see this on YouTube and would like to join our Telegram groups, so this is where you are. So if you're already not in the Telegram groups and you want to join, so you can just ask on this number to join the groups, so you can access the recording, right? And then you're going to use it.